You're listening to rainforest sounds near Mission Beach in Queensland, Australia. An example of the tremendous diversity that still exists out there. Now, conservation biology is a study that seeks to understand the loss, protection, and restoration of biological diversity. Now, this is kind of the last part of Chapter 11. We've talked about what is biodiversity, why is biodiversity important, some of the threats to biodiversity, and then this last bit we'll be talking a little bit about kind of this discipline of conservation biology and what it is and what it does. And it'll be broken down into two separate lectures, and there are several links to the recording that you just heard from SoundCloud, as well as other YouTube videos and external links that I encourage you to review. So, without further ado, again, conservation biology is this whole entire academic discipline that is kind of this action-oriented discipline, trying to understand the loss, protection, and ultimately the restoration of biological diversity. Now, it kind of starts, or it works hand in hand with genetics. Conservation genetics determine how small a population can be, how small a population can become, or how much genetic variation a species or a population can lose before encountering substantial or significant inbreeding. And so by determining this size, we can help wildlife managers make plans for increasing the size of a population. Small, isolated populations are the most vulnerable within kind of a larger network of populations. And so these small, isolated ones may get special attention. Species often are broken down into two different categories, endangered and threatened. Within the Endangered Species Act of 1973, this is a U.S.-specific national legislation that aims to protect species that fall within either of these two categories. Endangered is the more threatened category, or the more in danger of becoming extinct, whereas threatened is just a slightly less threatening category. It is likely to become endangered soon. So the ESA, the Endangered Species Act, forbids the U.S. government and citizens from taking actions that destroy individuals. This is called a take, taking individuals, within identified species. So as of 2016, over 1,000 species were listed as endangered, and several hundred were listed as threatened. The ESA had a fair bit of early success with very iconic species, including the bald eagle, the peregrine falcon, the brown pelican, which is common along our coasts, and other birds following the ban of the chemical DDT. However, federal authorization for spending for the ESA, or Endangered Species Act, has expired almost 30 years ago and is yet to be reauthorized since. And therefore, there is a severe lack of funding to kind of process species and to be able to implement actions to help restore species. And so a number of species that are likely in great need of protection have not been added to the law, meaning they have not been listed as threatened or endangered. One of the reasons for this is that the law is often seen as imperiling the livelihoods of some people. So it's this idea that you need to choose between wildlife or the economy. And there's an example of in the Pacific Northwest, reduced timber harvesting in old forests due to the endangered northern spotted owl and marbled murrelet, which prevented some logging in that region. However, the ESA does not always stop development projects, and there are several ways that it the federal government attempts to cooperate with landowners. Two examples of those are habitat conservation plans and safe harbor agreements, which you can read about. There are also international treaties that promote conservation. The 1973 Convention on the International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna. So this is short, the acronym here is CITES. And this bans the international transport of rare species. So this includes plants and animals. And this is, probably everybody in this in class has heard about kind of trafficking of elephant ivory or rhino horn, for instance. And this is the legislation, the international legislation that bans those international shipments. Another important legislation is the Convention on Biological Diversity. This is a treaty that provides funding and incentives for conservation in countries around the world.